is deportation and why do people get deported from New Zealand?
Well, there could be several reasons, for example, conviction for criminal activities, there could be public interest factors, or the very fact that you're unlawfully in New Zealand. These could be a few of reasons that could trigger deportation.
So, with deportation, can permanent resident holders also get deported?
Yes, it depends on the circumstances and what type of crime. Some people getting convicted of certain crimes are open to deportation. For instance, if you breach condition of your visa, your first stay, you are caught for fraud, you give false or misleading information to Immigration New Zealand, you use fake identity, or within 5 years of your visa, immigration finds new information that would not have entitled you to a visa. Or let's say, for example, Minister of Immigration New Zealand finds you as being a threat to New Zealand. There are many reasons that can trigger deportation.
So it's probably a good idea if you've been in New Zealand to start looking at the option of applying for your citizenship.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you want to talk a bit about the deportation process in New Zealand?
Well, in short, once a deportation notice is issued, you have the options of departing voluntarily, or you would be forced to leave in accordance with the notice.
And so if somebody has received a deportation notice or knows somebody that is getting deported, how can reaching out to an immigration lawyer help?
Well, once a deportation notice is issued, generally you will have 14 days to give Immigration New Zealand good reasons why you should not be deported. And and they then have 28 days of the notice of appeal to Immigration and Protection Tribunal. So there are ways around how, depending on the circumstances, how deportation can be challenged.
What I've also found, Deep, is sometimes that 28 days notice can be a bit challenging for immigration lawyers to work with, because especially if the appellant or the applicant does not have all the immigration documents in line for the lawyer to actually understand the issue and how they can be of help. So moving on to the next one. If somebody who has been living in New Zealand, say gets convicted and ends up in prison for a couple of years to maybe 4 to 5 years, is there any hope for them? Is there any chance of them being able to then appeal their notice of deportation and stay back in New Zealand?
Well, again, depending on the circumstances and the evidence, there are ways around how we can file an appeal against the deportation to the tribunal. But again, like I've said, a lot goes around your circumstances and the evidence at hand. And the earliest a lawyer of expertise can assist, the better, the sooner the better. Yeah.
Do you remember one of the cases that came before the tribunal that you mentioned before?
Yes, sure. We will discuss a bit about one of the cases that came a few years ago before the tribunal on a similar situation, and tribunal had to deal with a number of factors. Again, I'm not going in details about the case, but in that particular case where the tribunal had to deal with whether to deport a person holder of a residence visa, they looked at a number of things like there were psychologist report, family members, witnesses and evidence. In that case, the husband was getting deported. They even looked at the wife's evidence and medical documentation, the guy's behavior in prison. The guy even did an anger management course, and yeah, they had children also. The court also looked at the impact on the family and the children.
So I'll give our listeners a bit of background about this issue that went before the New Zealand Immigration and Protection Tribunal. There was this appellant who had come into New Zealand under a student visa, had studied, had gotten married to a local citizen, and had a child, and then based on the crime that he was convicted of, he ended up in prison for 5 to 6 years. After he had completed his stay in prison, he was then given a deportation notice, to which he then appealed in the tribunal. The tribunal actually had to assess a variety of things, and like you mentioned before, each situation is very different.
Exactly. And in that particular case, the tribunal had to consider a number of evidence and factors, like I say, the wife was not well, and even the child had some medical issues which could best be treated in New Zealand. The risk of reoffending was considered, the programs, the courses the appellant did was considered. So it's not an easy process. It's if you miss the right evidence and information, your appeal could be dismissed. The lawyers involved had to deal with a number of legal issues, a number of mitigating factors, and convince the tribunal of the existence of exceptional circumstances that would trigger the discretion of the tribunal in setting aside the deportation. So, yes, like we are saying, the bottom line is deportation can be challenged. There are ways around it, but every case has its own facts. And as lawyers, we are in the best position to identify the evidence that the tribunal would be interested to see and understand. Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing that with the listeners. The main aspect, I guess, I get out of it is it's on the applicant and their lawyers to prove that there is exceptional circumstances, which means if the applicant had not taken the step of going to an immigration lawyer and making that appeal, they would have had to be deported back to their country that they came from. Once again, if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below, and we'll wait for our next video. Thank you, Deep.
Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
See you.